there are many different ways to categorize, the different stages of luxury consumption.
Because everything is so easily available, I need something as an emergency, got on Amazon, today it's going to come, I'm going to have what I need. That actually when you get something that's personal, it's so abnormal that almost it's so powerful and impactful because of it.
I would say the reason I'm talking about personalization is because, we are using algorithms to develop our businesses, to reach our audiences almost all the time, right? But personalization or customization, in a way, I think the fundamental benefits it brings is to make consumers' life more intuitive. Before I act upon a decision, okay, someone already did it for me. I don't need to think twice. Okay, I'll just go with my flow, then no disruptions. Luxury is actually about managing this paradox between accessibility and exclusivity, right?
This is Hospitality Huddles, bringing you the best conversations in hotel, food and beverage.
Manage, lead, coach, repeat.
Every time I think of hospitality, I think of friendship. Hospitality allows you to be you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Hospitality Huddles. And this week we are shifting outside the industry for just 1 week to talk to Professor Zi, who has been talking about luxury in a number of different papers. And I'm really excited to delve into what today's modern guest looks like from a luxury perspective. Zi, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and sharing some of your time and wisdom with us.
Thank you very much, Scott, for the invitation. And hello, everyone. I'm Professor Zi Wang. I'm currently a researcher, scholar working in luxury consumption, brand consumption, and AI-centered well-being for consumers' trends.
Fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to delving into some of that. There's some very relevant topics to what we're seeing in hotels and luxury hotels in particular right now. And I think if we kick off with probably the broadest question I'm going to ask today, which is how do you define luxury today and how has it changed over time? How would you answer that question?
Well, I think the answer is absolute. Luxury has evolved over time. And today, I would say that the meaning has evolved from what's conventionally defined as luxury, which is centered, around viscosity, craftsmanship, or social distinctiveness, to a more self-defined, orientation. And we say that luxury today, it's more liquid. Or it's well-being centered, or it's experiential, centered, rather than what was, defined as, these markers of success in, to distinguish from that. I would say that it moves beyond purely symbolic meanings to a well-being centered, direction.
And is that down to a shift in kind of generation and who's now the primary or who's becoming the more primary guest and their values are different? Or is that just kind of the world that's moved and changed and new trends coming in?
Well, I think from my perspective, it's both, right? If we look at the generations, how they grew up, the socioeconomics environment they're situated today, let's say the new generations like Gen Z, they are digital natives. They were born, they don't need to adapt. They are born as digital natives, adapting to these different changes. They develop their, relationships with technology, with the different disruptions, the noises, as they grew up. However, when we look back as the trend of luxury, development, right? If we can give some important turning point in the history, I would say, 18th century, right, could be a starting point for luxury consumption. And back then, there was this aristocratic patronage of haute couture, which people use it as a symbol to mark their social elitism. And then we enter this modern period of luxury, which is the late 20s. Luxury is becoming more experiential, from having more to feeling more, from being socially seen to self-expressing, right? And then we moved to this contemporary period of luxury consumption, which, is driven by digitalization, which is driven by well-being or, sustainability. And there are lots of values like moral values, cultural values, emotional values, brings new capitals to the, materialistic capital of the luxury definition. So I would say, there are many different ways to categorize, the different stages of luxury consumption. If we use a consumer-centric perspective, of course we can use all these hot topics, hot trends, buzzwords like Gen Z, millennials, but I think it's beyond that. Or even these new generations, like, if we separate people's like boomers, millennials, and Gen Z, I think they do share some common characters, but again, unique in their own way. I guess it depends on how you wish to segment, your target audiences. Then, the nuances are still there. Yeah.
I think what's really interesting is I mentioned off air that we're working on a 5-star hotel in London, and they're going through a period of change now with their project, where they're starting to see an older generation starting to drift away that have been very brand loyal or hotel loyal in this case. And they want to start saying the new generation coming through, we need to start creating experience for them. And as we've been looking at that, we've been really looking at how that defines. And I think one of the things that we've seen from that is twofold. The first of all is I think it's become more and more important now to talk to the primary guest who you're talking to, because this engagement in what you offer and what you want to be is what people connect with more. So it's not necessarily the brand of the hotel that they're connecting with. It's the individual experiences that they have. And actually, that experience in London might be different to the experience in New York, to Paris, to Dubai, to Singapore. And therefore, the brand of the hotel isn't what's important. It's what sits inside. And the other thing that we've noticed quite a bit is time has become much more of a commodity that people value over how much something costs. So actually, the price they pay is now determined not by how great the food is, how great the drink is, the service. It's about whether it was worth spending their time with you and engaging with you. And I think that's a really interesting shift of maybe when I was working in luxury hotels, where it was all about the food, the drink, the experience, the service. It's just really interesting how that shifts. And is that largely down to the digital age making things a bit more commoditized because it's a bit more accessible, or is that just the way the world's changed? Is it the pandemic? What's caused some of those shifts? Because it feels like it's a huge shift versus maybe 10 years ago, maybe more.
Well, thank you for this question. I think there is lots of richness in what you're asking and what you're describing. And I think all the observations that you've had are valid. And to be honest, in a certain degree, I would say that is exactly what's happening in today's world. We say that, yes, digitalization is definitely one of the driver, for the revolution that reshapes the consumption dynamics. Let's say if before we say luxury is about having more, feeling more, and today consumers care more about, being more conscious in their consumption choices, right? They want to be more morally coherent, right? Well, I think there is this value shifted, right, beyond, the digitalization, beyond, these external, definitions. So let's say the new generation, of course, they don't need to adapt because they were basic natives. During the pandemic, we say that because of lots of disruptions, people do not have the same accessibility to their basic resources that make them happy anymore. So therefore, people started to realize, okay, if this is a disruption, if, my resources are constrained. What are more important to me? What makes me happy? So that brings them to the fundamental core of what is happiness, what is well-being, what brings people this ultimate or philosophically defined happiness comes to the picture. It's no longer this instant gratification of buying a piece of luxury item, showing off or having social validation. It's something that has to match their inner resonance, like you said, like a peace of mind or self-resonance, right? Which needs to match their inner values. And this is why we say that luxury is shifting to a more morally, charged developing trend. People want this sort of consistency, no matter for what they consume, how they allocate their personal resources, time, emotions, money. They want to, they want to stay true. They want to stay authentic. In a way, they can build their resilience towards any unexpected, disruptions or any challenges in life. So I would say, this is. But we are still at this post-pandemic stage, whereas this, impact are still playing its own role in reshifting the consumption trend. Yeah.
Yeah, can we talk more a little bit about that? Because I think that's really interesting. And it's, the statement that I hear again and again from, I guess, the pandemic is we've never been more connected, but we're actually not very good at connection anymore. And therefore, back to what you're saying there is if we can kind of develop that, we've got the start of a luxury that's there. And I think when we play on a lot of the concepts we're doing right now, we really try and play on the social element of bringing people together and creating a hub that gets people talking and engaging together. And it's really interesting what you say there about that example. So how has the pandemic changed luxury and how we see luxury?
So I did this study during COVID, by interviewing, people, participants crossing the different continents, right? And then I find out this commonly shared trend that, how people cherish this, blissful moment or momentary luxury, or like you say, the time, or this fleeting, luxury, which could be a moment, could be, anything that brings this sort of feeling of bliss, right? So in terms of how people connect, I think it's not only about interpersonal connection, it's also the connections that we made with the nature, the connection that we have with ourselves at the core, right? So, for example, in hospitality industry, the important thing, moves beyond, understanding the preferences of the rooms for consumers. Instead, it's about understanding the state of mood that people are actually situating in, right? How could I, make people feel better seen or better understood in a way that I'm forming up a connection deeply with them, that they could resonate, that could echo how they understand about happiness, about bliss, right? So I think this is something that, if I put it in a more concrete way, I think this means that it's about how people prefer to be reached out. For example, the communication code, it's beyond the marketing tricks, right? It's beyond the marketing promotion, but something rather authentic, something that rather deeply connected with the calling of happiness, with the well-being through the whole production, operation, or the whole ecosystem of a brand, of any, let's say, hospitality brand, right? It's about offering something that are truly satisfying, truly benefiting, instead of selling, for the sake of marketing, right? But I would say that what we are describing here is also related to the core of luxury. If you talk about the inner peace, the self-resonance, I think is quite scarce or inaccessible, despite the noises that we have in social media environments, despite the anxiety created by the marketplace, right? So I would say that providing that peace of mind, providing that sort of connection with oneself, right, is what the new luxury value should be leading to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the bit you touched on there about the personalization, but being really authentic with it is definitely something we're seeing in terms of in terms of luxury environments and how you can build some of that into the experience. And we talk a lot about how kind of profiling guests and building up a picture of what your guest is like means every time they come back to your venue that you can recognize it. That might be saying that you've got the bottle of wine ready on ice that they had the last time they visited. It might be welcoming them back. It might be welcoming them back after the fifth visit. But that little touch of personalization through the experience is what's setting people apart now. And I think, back to my earlier point, the food and the service is almost an expectation now because we have traveled more, we have seen more luxury environments, we are going to eat out, etc. So I think the bits that really count now to guests are those little moments that show you are different to others and that you care a bit more than others. And I think that's definitely something you were touching on with the hotel rooms, for example. It's not good enough now to know they just need a city view, but I remember little bits that we used to do in the Dorchester collection where, if a single guest was sleeping on one side of the bed, you'd shift the whole room to be on that side of the bed, and little things like that. I put a comment on a guy who's actually been on the podcast, Oliver Corrin, this morning. He's based in Singapore. He was talking about luxury, and he was talking about culture. And I put a thing on there that was talking all about how now it's things like, understanding what maybe the guest likes and getting magazines in the room that's tailored to their hobbies and preferences rather than just generic Vogue and things like that sits in a hotel bedroom. And I think it's those little bits, isn't it, that just kind of sets that little element of luxury apart.
I completely agree with you. I'd like to ask you this question, right? So what do you think is the goal of personalization? Why do we need personalization these days? I'd also like to ask this question to all the audiences who might be listening to us, right? So what is the goal of that?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think if you ask my personal opinion, I think because everything is so easily available. So, yesterday I needed something. I got on Amazon. I need something as an emergency. Got on Amazon. Today it's going to come. I'm going to have what I need. If I want, any item of clothing now, you can go online, you can get it. And I just think now that because everything's so easily accessible, I think when something's done for you, I think it just hits a bit more because you almost stop in your tracks and recognize it. So I gave an example a couple of weeks ago to someone. I have this, I drink this tea called Mission, which is helps with my running. And when I got the first box, when I first ordered it, I had a handwritten note in there that was, "Thank you so much for ordering your first order. Here's," I think it was 20% off the next order, that type of thing. But it was handwritten. And when I got it, the first thing I looked at, bearing in mind it was the first time I got this tea, wasn't the tea, it was the note. And I had it in my hand and I was reading it. The first thing I noticed, it was handwritten. So I knew, back to your point, it wasn't the typical marketing. These things had been printed in the thousands and just thrown in the box. And it set me back to go, wow, someone actually recognized that. And I think it's that whole piece around everything's quite commercial now, that actually when you get something that's personal, it's so abnormal that almost it's so powerful and impactful because of it, that it's there. It's like, how many times do you get a letter in the post anymore? Hardly ever. So if you were to suddenly get something handwritten in the post, it kind of sets you back. And I think that's the bit of why personalization is so important. And I also believe it's why some of these limited drops that companies are doing are so impactful, because it's that whole piece around everything's so accessible. The idea of
Yeah,
something not being available creates
yeah,
this urge
yeah,
to have it.
yeah,
So you're sitting
yeah,
there at 8 a.m. waiting for the
yeah,
drop to come, hoping that the website picks you out to get it, and all of a sudden it's gone. And I think it's those little bits that, back to your point
yeah,
of the digital world, has made
yeah, yeah,
everything so easy that when actually something is a little bit harder, or something's got a little bit more thought into it, I think it's
yeah.
become more important to us. I don't know if that's something that you agree with or you think as well. I mean, flip it back. Why do you think personalization is so important?
Well, I completely agree with, first of all, I would like
Yeah.
to mention this. I completely agree with your point, right? Despite we talked about how luxury meaning has transformed over time, there is something that hasn't been changed at all.
Yeah.
Is about, luxury is actually about managing this paradox between accessibility and exclusivity, right? How to create that scarcity, right? Because luxury means, I say this kind of characteristics lies still in the core of luxury. As you said, if I know, okay, this is a standardized note that everybody would receive, right? Then I started to feel less special, right? I'm not treated as, this kind of emotional stake, this kind of emotional valence is gone for me. So basically, that's a very, very interesting point. I would say the reason I'm talking about personalization is because, we are using algorithms to develop our businesses, to reach our audiences almost all the time, right? But personalization or customization, in a way, I think the fundamental benefits it brings is to make consumers' life more intuitive
Yeah.
as it can. Before I act upon a decision, okay, someone already did it for me. I don't need to think twice. Okay, I'll just go with my flow. Then no disruptions. It's, in a way, I think it definitely saves the cognitive capacity. Imagine how many decisions I need to make per day, right? And I don't even want to think about in where I go to buy this toothpaste or this jam. I'll just go whatever that is designed or decided for me already, right? So again, I think that depends on the intelligence of the algorithms, whether it's making the extra error or causing extra trouble. Well, the thing that I would say could perhaps help hospitality to advance a little bit is to use this personalization function to anticipate, but beyond what people need as a material, but to anticipate consumers' mood, needs, wants, their sensations, for example, their sleeping patterns, their emotional states. Because at the end of the day, we say luxury consumption, it's really about adding this kind of emotional value to consumers rather than this functional value or materialistic value, right? Which is at the core of its offerings, right? But the thing is that we want to offer this kind of services in a way we still want people to stay human. We still want people to feel, they are being understood. We want this human empathy to people instead of feeling this cold algorithms, the personalization. I don't want that. I still want this human touch, right? So I would say that the very tricky part is about how to hide the technology or the personalization algorithms elegantly while still maintaining this human touch, right? So I think that should be, something that, let's say the marketers or brand managers really need to think about, is to develop this emotional intelligence instead of purely rely on the personalization recommendations from the algorithms. It's still relying largely on the human side to master the services offerings, right? So instead of a room preferences, instead of the magazine preferences you mentioned about. So I think the tempo of life, or the sort of in empathy, how that empathy is being interpreted is, being expected or could bring the extra emotional value to consumers.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think the other thing that I always hear again and again, and I don't really have any basis for this, but I know you wrote a paper about sustainability in luxury. How important truly important is sustainability and ethics today to the luxury guest? And I think what would be really interesting is, what does sustainability really mean? Because I feel like it's used as a really broad word, and
Yeah.
actually, to me, that whole piece around sustainability could be wellness, it could be looking after the planet, it could be business sustainability, it could be a number of things. So I guess, yeah, the question, how important is sustainability and ethics, and what does sustainability mean in the luxury market?
That's a very good question. So actually, every aspect, all the examples you've given, they all belong to the sustainability category. We used to have this sustainability webinar or workshops, right? It could include, a massive range of topics. But if we look at luxury sector, especially, what was conventionally defined as luxury, very pricey product, very excessive, material, which could potentially cost, let's say the material waste, or or this excessive consumption, very consumerism, which is against the goal of protecting the planet, or let's say. And this is also relevant to what we talked about as this luxury value transformation for our consumers, right? People want to be more relevant these days instead of being excessive, right? They still want to build a very close relationships. They want to nourish the planet while they satisfy their own needs and wants. They want to be caring, they want to be ethical, they want to stay authentic in a way that they can master their own emotional intimacy with the externals, right? We see there is this fundamental shift in the values of, what people pursue in the consumption scenarios, which is, very, very important in terms of how people decide, okay, I like this brand, right? This makes me happy. So I think sustainability in luxury could be defined in a way, it's about this exact amount of consumption instead of overly consumed of something that people don't really need. But again, it could play a very positive role to the planet, or to other people's lives.
Yeah. So I guess from a food and beverage perspective,
Yeah.
just doing things like plant-based offers or local produce and isn't necessarily is good, but it's almost an expectation. And it's, how do you offer kind of stories around what that is? So one of the things we're looking at the minute is we've found this paper supplier where you can send all your like offcuts from the peels of the vegetables, and you can send your coffee grinds to them. They then use that to make coloured paper, and then you buy it back from them, and you can use it in your menus. And it's got that story of kind of going, we really believe in this, and this is one of the things that we're doing. I think there's a lot of companies that are now going for things like B Corp and stuff like that. And I guess is that value to the modern luxury guest, or is that just something that they almost kind of expect or overlook, and actually they're looking for elements built into the experience in a hotel wider of, okay, there's a gym, but is there a room where we can go and meditate, or we can go and kind of deconnect and things like that? Is that overthinking it slightly, or is it some of the basics that now just need to be kind of ticked for them to feel conscious that they're in the right place? So if they've flown all over the world in a private jet, going to a hotel that is ingrained in sustainability, it almost helps balance the pendulum to an extent.
That's a very good question, Scott. And I still think that what you mentioned as this menu, as this locality in the menu design, it's still very relevant to luxury experiences in hospitality. Why? For example, people they crave for stories instead of purely a menu that tells them, okay, this is they want to know, for example, the origin of the spices. They want to know the philosophy of the chef. This is something could build, let's say, cultural intimacy between the customer and the industry. So we say it's not about infusion, but it's about the connections. It's about bridging that emotional gaps between consumers and this hospitality sector, right? So I think the whole culture behind the offerings is still, plays at a very important role in what is defined or what is perceived as luxury in the hospitality industry. Yeah.
It's
Of
really
course, you
interesting.
talked about this meditation room. Of course, it's always nice to have one, but it's not conflicting with, the sort of, narratives of the, the restaurant offerings, or, the sort of philosophy that you're trying to explain to your consumers, which also has a higher moral positioning, authentic moral positioning of your overall offerings, of your overall value propositions. But the thing is that it's not about offering different segments. It's about how these different offerings that aligns with each other, that reflecting the overall value proposition of your brand, of your company. The alignment is what really matters to people.
And it's a really interesting shift, isn't it? Because I think over time, I guess it's probably fair to say that kind of brand loyalty has diminished slightly, and experience has taken over, or convenience has taken over. So I use it a lot to kind of say now people don't necessarily go to travel and go to the same hotel group because they get their Hilton honors or their diamond status and things like that. It's more around, what do I want to do in that city? Find the hub of what's convenient and where you can go to the individual places. And that's where the book. And if your hotel is one where they've got the loyalty status and they collect the point, that's great, but it's not the overall driver. Is that something you're seeing from your research and kind of delving into the different guest sets that you see, or is brand loyalty still important to luxury guests?
Well, I think the answer is yes. Brand loyalty is still very important, and we still try to, our companies, they still need to think about the ways to build this sort of emotional attachment. But the thing is that no matter how the formats being shifted, as you mentioned, people might look for experiential, they might look for, convenience. No matter what, you need to see through, what people are still looking for, let's say, beyond this facade, right? I would say that fundamental core hasn't been changed at all, right?
Okay.
I would say they're still trying to close a gap between their ideal state and their current state, and try to, maintain this self-consistency, or, trying to, achieve this socially desired self. Still, again, trying to close a gap between the different dimensions of their self-status. And that thing has not changed yet. So it's about really understanding consumers from their own perspective, what is missing in that gap. Right? What is missing emotionally? What is missing? How do we help people to align with their self-concept, to be a better self, or to maintain that self-consistency, or to build this self-connection with themselves? I would say this fundamental core, from humanity perspective, has not been changed at all. So let's move beyond all these different formats, all these different, status. Let's still go back to what builds this sort of emotional attachment that links with this loyalty, formation, right? Let's still go back to that. I wouldn't think, the things have been that different.
Yeah, and I guess that whole element of that loyalty is around trust, connection, kind of consistency, all those type of things is still what's driving. And I think it's really interesting viewpoint, because you're right, it's not particularly changed a lot over when I think about working in luxury hotels, and when we've worked in when I've ran luxury restaurants. It is still that whole piece around that trust and consistency in delivering what they expect, so that when they bring guests in or when they come for a special occasion, they know they're not going to get let down. Is the difference over going to, a casual dining restaurant or something like that? It's why people have picked luxury environments for special occasions for years, isn't it? Because of that reason.
Yeah, and Scott, imagine people wouldn't remember, what's in a room or what they've been consumed, right? After some years, after some time, they will remember how they were being seen, they were being understood, what you make them feel. That's something at the essence. It's not about, okay, I don't remember anything about, a luxury, instead of the sort of satisfaction that I got from the experience. Yeah. So it's the emotional value again. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Two last questions to ask, and this one's just popped up as you were saying that last piece is, I guess we're now starting to see multi-generational trips, multi-generational visits. Obviously, people living later. I think it's three generations now that are traveling more often. And I saw a stat that I presented actually in a keynote earlier in the year, and it was that 80% of family trips are now being influenced by Gen Z, whereas in the past it would have been more the parents said, this is where we're going and this is where we're staying and this is what we're going to do. Now Gen Z are finding the hotels and the restaurants and things like that on social media and what have you, and they're kind of more the influencers rather than the payers. And one of the things that I was starting to say is, when you've got the guy coming now and paying the bill, but maybe he's not the one who's influencing where they've stayed or that type of thing, there's a lot more to consider in terms of the experience and how you can make it work for three different generations that want three different things potentially. I think you might have answered it based on the emotion and feel in there, but how has that shift changed because of it? And do you see Gen Z as such influencers in the new luxury visits and experiences from the research that you've done?
Well, I think Gen Z is definitely a very special, I would say, a leading consumption force these days. But you talk about this family scenario, right? I mean, I think it depends. Well, let's say they know all the cool stuff, right? I mean, for example, I felt like, I'm a dinosaur. I want to know what's new, what's cool, what's trendy. Okay, let's ask the Gen Z. Well, in that sort of reference, context, yes, let's go with the Gen Z, right? But I mean, the thing is that why should we follow the Gen Z, or how important are their opinions, in determining the overall, consumption choices? I would say yes, they are very impactful. They're very impactful on the internet. If you look at this internet memes, if you look at all this playful, authenticity that they're trying to create, or this sort of engaging, this sort of playfulness in their post or the content they're sharing, I think is driving the luxury, marketing, the sensory design into a completely advanced or cool experience, even for the elder generation. Is something rather compelling for the whole group of people, I think, to be attracted. I think, one very interesting character that I sensed with Gen Z is this inclusivity, right? Whether it's this kind of narratives, fluidity as gender or things like that. Because people still crave for this kind of fairness or social fairness, social inclusivity in a way. So I think to some extent they represent, the new values that the society is really craving for. So I would say that perhaps that is why they are providing this kind of new narratives in a way that is rather advancing the other generations' experiences.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's really interesting. Do you think, and this is probably going to sound strange, but do you think luxury has become more casual because of Gen Z? In that, if I walk in, say, there's a new Rosewood that's just opened in London, the Chancery Rosewood, estimated that they spent $1 billion on the renovation and fit out. When you go in there, it actually feels really accessible. That's from
Yeah.
the service on the door, from the uniforms that they've been that they've curated. A couple of the different F&B outlets that are in there are definitely low entry point venues that are starting to engage a different audience. If I'm overanalyzing it sitting there looking, but it definitely feels more accessible than maybe 10, 15 years ago. You'd look at the door of the Dorchester and the Savoy and things like that and think, can we go in? Are we okay to go in? Do we have enough money to go in through the doors? You look at the Savoy storytelling now, which is very much built around human and being engaging and personality and big smiles and things like that.
Yeah.
Are we having to adapt? And maybe, is casual the right word? I'm not sure, but become a bit more accessible for the Gen Z and the new guest.
I completely agree with you. For Gen Z, I would say this is related to what we discussed as the luxury value shifts. It's not about having more. It's not about being more expensive, having fewer, but more meanings or more purpose, right? Reflects the value, a pursuit of Gen Z in terms of luxury consumption. And being original, it's so important than being rich, than being inaccessible, and that's definitely another apparent generational differences in terms of luxury definition. But you see, lots of luxury brands, as we see, they are adapting to this new trend that they're trying to encourage personal narratives over brand narratives, and you can see this remix of high and low, in one luxury setting, or in what's these young generations are performing, are carrying. It's this playful, this remix, trends that are very interesting, or that are rather joyful, are rather purposeful, are rather meaningful. For as you spotted as this new trend, I would say.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I think that's really exciting as well. Is how you, especially in our sector, I think making luxury and experience more accessible is a really exciting opportunity, because I think it opens the door to way more creativity, way more innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
You can really push the boundaries on a lot more. We just brought out a white paper, and we were talking about how micro niche concepts have really got an opportunity now to come into food and beverage. So when you walk into a hotel, you see the whole public area as an experience of how you curate transition for different times of day and different reasons for going. And I think it's one of those that is in the back of our mind when we're developing that, is a Gen Z that might feel more comfortable than going to sit in your restaurant and having a 3-course dinner that might take an hour and a half, 2 hours. Actually just going and sitting on a stool on a counter and having oysters and a glass of champagne. And that's kind of given them that luxury experience that means they can come in, they can have something, they can go and experience the city, they can come back. And I think there's all these little bits now where the change in the guest is meaning we can be a little bit more creative and a little less stereotypical of what we develop, which is a really exciting opportunity. And last question, we started with a broad one, we'll finish with a broad one as well. But for those people who are listening, and there's been so much great advice and conversation in the episode, what are some of the key things that you would say to those working in luxury environments right now, primarily hotels, food and beverage, which are listening to this, of how they can adapt to what they're doing to appeal to the new guest?
Very interesting question, and that pretty much summarizes what we have discussed so far. In terms of these hands-on, suggestions, I would say number one, you need to think about how to cultivate emotional intelligence, right? Because as we say, people won't remember at the end of the day for which the room type they're staying, but rather than how they felt being seen, how they felt being understood, instead of other physical information cues, right? And for the second one, I think it's about stories, not menu. We talk about, giving the philosophy of a chef. We talk about locality. We talk about explaining the origin of your spices. We talk about building this whole cultural intelligence behind, what's offering, as on the menu. And it's something about bridging the psychological or emotional gaps between, a service provider and the consumers. And I think the next one is about stay human while embracing the technology. No matter how smart personalization or algorithms have changed our lives, they still need to be hidden through the chef, right? They still humanity is the ultimate luxury that we're looking for. We need this warmth. We need this genuine care from a human agent instead of the cold technology robot, or if you look at the Chinese hospitality industry, there are all these smart robots everywhere. But yes, it saves labor, but in a way, do people really like that, or do people really have this satisfying emotional experiences during the engagement with the robot, right? That's something we need to be mindful about. And the last one, I think, it's prioritize relevance rather than accessibilities, right? It's, for example, we want to create this kind of food that nourishes both the planet and the clients instead of creating lots of material waste. It's about master the emotional intimacy between what we are offering and the cost of those materials, which resonates with the moral values or moral intelligence that are important to our potential young generation customers. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And Zi, thank you very much for doing the episode. I think people will have taken so many takeaways. I know I certainly have. And it's been a really great conversation, just learning about how things are maybe not changed as much as we think they have, and some of those deep values are still firmly rooted. It's just how we apply them that's maybe changed over the past. So thank you very much for spending the time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Scott. And I'm happy to discuss further.
Fantastic. And if people are really interested by this and want to maybe see some of your papers or get in touch, is there a place where people can go to for those that you want to shout out? We can obviously put them in the show notes as well.
So you can put my email address and my contact information, my LinkedIn, all this where you can find me basically, and I can be reached out in any platform, in any format. I'm totally happy to discuss for further details. It's a very interesting topic, and thank you for opening the discussion, Scott. It's really a great pleasure to have discussed all these pertinent topics with you. Such a passionate researcher. I would call you a researcher as well, for diving into the industry for so long.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you very much. You've been listening to Hospitality Huddles, brought to you by Auden Hospitality. If you want to revisit clips from this or previous episodes, make sure you visit our YouTube channel at Auden Hospitality. Thank you for listening to the show. See you next time.